please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, which this evening will be led by Chris Birch.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chris. Roll call, please, Mrs. Meltzer.
Mrs. West.
Here.
Mr. Keys.
Here.
Mr. Pearl.
Here.
Mr. Cannon.
Here.
Mr. Aragona.
Here.
Mr. Gilliam.
Here.
Mrs. Meltzer here.
Are there any additions and/or deletions to tonight's agenda?
There are no deletions. However, there are two add-ons. Item 21, adoption of resolution revising the general fee schedule for fire prevention code. And item 22, add-on request approval to use vacant lot 21550 Harrington.
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mrs. West.
Yes.
Mr. Keys.
Yes.
Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Aragona.
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you, and welcome to your Township Board meeting this evening. If you have anything to say on any item as it comes before the board, please come to the podium and clearly give us your name and address for the record. If there's an item you wish to speak on that is not part of tonight's agenda, there are public comment cards in the front to your left. If you would fill one of those out, we'll hear what you have to say at the end of the meeting. And with that, we'll take item number 1, request to observe National Day of Prayer, May 2nd, 2019.
Dear Board of Trustees, for over 20 years, Bethany Baptist Church of Clinton Township has honored the National Day of Prayer by holding a time of prayer on the front steps of the township offices. In recognition of this year's 68th Annual National Day of Prayer, Bethany Baptist would like to once again ask permission from the Township Board to allow a National Day of Prayer observation at noon on Thursday, May 2nd, 2019, on the steps of the township offices. Every president since 1952 has signed a National Day of Prayer proclamation. Public Law 105-225 states, the president shall issue each year a proclamation designating the first Thursday in May as National Day of Prayer, on which the people of the United States may turn to God in prayer and meditation at churches, in groups, and as individuals. The National Day of Prayer was created in 1952 by a joint resolution of Congress and signed into law by President Harry S. Truman. This is not a religious movement nor a chance to merge church and state. This is simply an opportunity for citizens of this community to gather to pray. We will be praying for the leaders of our community and our country, our police and our emergency personnel, the men and women who serve here and abroad, our area businesses and our economy, our schools and our churches. We would like to encourage the people of our township, including our township officials, to join us as we pray on that day. This year's theme is Love One Another, just as I have loved you, the words of Jesus as found in John 13:34. Bethany Baptist Church will take the lead on organizing this event by providing sound equipment, including microphones and speakers. What we are requesting from the township is, first of all, permission and, if possible, a podium and outdoor power source. I would like to thank the Clinton Township Board of Trustees for taking the time to review this request. If you have questions or would like more information, you can contact me at Bethany Baptist Church, 19700 15 Mile Road, Clinton Township, Michigan. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Mark Reynolds, pastor of Bethany Baptist Church.
Thank you. We've done this every year since I've been around, and Pastor Reynolds brings a very nice group of folks out. It's a receive and file issue, and all are welcome. It takes less than an hour, and they do. They pray for this township board and all local officials. So thank you very much for doing that, and thank you for offering to come and do that. Sir,
So moved.
Support.
thank you. We will provide the materials that you need. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 2 is declaring May 12th through May 18th in 2019 Police Week in Clinton Township.
At the regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Charter Township of Clinton, held in the Board Chambers at 40700 Romeo Plank Road, Clinton Township, Michigan, on the 22nd day of April 2019, commencing at 6:30 p.m. Whereas in 1962, President John F. Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. Established by a joint resolution of Congress in 1962, National Police Week pays special recognition to those law enforcement enforcement officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. And whereas there are more than 800,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including the approximately 17,000 full-time uniformed police officers in Michigan. Whereas members of the law enforcement deserve the appreciation and respect of the people of Clinton Township, Michigan, for the merit, dignity, bravery, and reliability they exhibit each and every day. We must also honor the sacrifices made by families of police officers, as each day they must face constant fear as their loved ones work to protect us. And whereas in 2018 alone, 163 law enforcement officers were killed and many, many more assaulted in the line of duty across the country. The names of these dedicated public servants who made the ultimate sacrifice are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., whereas Michigan's and Clinton Township's fallen officers will never be forgotten, nor will their service to their respective communities. By choosing to commit themselves to law enforcement, these brave individuals answered the call for service and willingly put their lives in jeopardy. We commend them for recognizing service as a noble career and protecting the public safety, and also all of those who are serving without incident to date. Whereas Clinton Township, Michigan, and all Michigan citizens have turned to members of law enforcement for assistance and support in times of distress, whether they are coping with personal crisis or struggling through civil disorder or natural disaster. Our communities rely on these courageous individuals when it is difficult to stand on our own, and we are indebted to their unwavering police service of our local and state police. We are indeed fortunate and grateful for the contributions of law enforcement officers to the people of this state. Therefore, now, let it be resolved that the members of this Board of Trustees declare May 12th to the 18th of 2019 as Police Week in the Charter Township of Michigan. We publicly salute the service of law enforcement officers in our community, as well as those of our state and nation, and honor police who place their lives on the line for the safety and security of their communities.
Thank you. I know that all of us on this board feel exactly that way. Too often nationwide, our police department, as well as other public safety officials, are not given the recognition, the praise, and the thanks that they deserve. So on behalf of the Township Board and the 100,000-plus residents of Clinton Township, the floor is open for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Support.
Thank you. And Chief, would you please pass on to your staff how much we appreciate what they do every single day?
Thank you, Chief.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melter, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 3, request approval of an Eagle Scout project.
Dear Mr. Miller, I am Chris Birch, an Eagle Scout applicant from Troop 472 out of St. Theclas. I am proposing my Eagle project to improve the observation platform currently built in the Tomlinson Arboretum. I am planning on building a bench on the platform and 4 planter boxes around it. This will greatly improve the functionality of the platform by allowing people a place to relax as they visit the Arboretum. I have spoken to Mr. Leppo from the Arboretum Society and shown him drawings of the proposed project, and he thinks this will be an asset for the Arboretum. My Troops Committee has approved my proposal, and I am hoping to gain the Township's approval. The planters will be covered in Trex decking, and they will have a frame built from treated lumber. The planters will be put on the outside of the platform on top of pre-made concrete slabs placed on top of the pea stone to help with leveling. The planters will be secured to the slabs using Tapcon screws. The bench will be placed onto the platform's center. It will be built out of treated lumber and covered in Trex decking. It will also be attached to the deck with screws through the 6x6 timbers on each of the corners. I really think this will be an asset to the community, and I'm very much looking forward to getting the board's approval. Christopher Birch, Eagle Scout applicant.
Thank you. This is in the Arboretum that was requested about 11 or 12 years ago, Dan, now, when Don Green, Doc Becker, Ray Gleim, and Jim Hungerford came forward and asked if they could start a project that would never be completed. And Doc has died since it began. Dan Leppo has stepped in and become the laborer leader of all the volunteers in the Arboretum, and has come a long way. We've had one other Eagle Scout project, and Chris, I should tell you that I've known a lot of people who have done Eagle Scout projects, and I've never seen one who wasn't successful in life. So you're on the right track. Congratulations. Dan, is there anything you wanted to add?
Dan Leppo, 41149 Redwood Court, coordinator of the Friends of the Arboretum. And Chris is here. I wanted to introduce him so he could give you a little more insight into his project. There's some sketches that you have there that'll show both the benches that will be for them, and then on the backside is are the planters. Chris?
As mentioned in the letter, the benches will be made out of treated lumber and Trex decking. The Trex decking is mostly there to improve the durability of the benches. The planter boxes will also be made out of Trex stepping to help improve durability, and inside of them there'll be plastic tubs so that way flowers or other plants can be planted inside of them. Mr. Cannon, I'd like you to sign this paper for my district so that way I can continue on with the project. Right.
I know St. Douglas is very proud, parents are very proud, so thank you for what you're doing, Chris, and we're looking forward to the project being completed.
Thank you.
Mr. Cannon, may I say something? And this is, young man, this is a perfect day to do it. This is Earth Day, so
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept your
All right,
your
thank
plan.
you.
Thank you.
Just keeps getting better, Dan. Roll call, please.
And I think it was Mr. Pearl that seconded it,
I
or
did.
Mr.?
Oh,
You
seconded.
Okay,
Mr. Key seconded it.
Sorry.
second. And who made the motion then? Mrs. West? Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melter, yes, motion passes.
Thank you. And item 4 is fireworks recognition.
Hey.
Dear board members, as we prepare for our 2019 fireworks concert, we want to acknowledge our 2018 primary partners and their generous contributions to the residents of Clinton Township. The fireworks concert can only exist with the commitment of generous organizations. Over the past 5 years, the Clinton Township Fireworks Concert has grown substantially, and the dedication from our partners continues to provide lifelong memories for our residents and many families from surrounding communities. We want to ensure that our partners are recognized. We place their logos on banners, printed materials, stage banners, social media posts, recognize them in our brochure, and tonight in front of our televised board meeting. I think it's imperative to inform our elected officials and the residents of our community what businesses have stepped up to provide substantial monetary contributions to the quality of life in Clinton Township. These organizations have partnered with our fireworks concert for many years, and we admire their commitment to our residents in Clinton Township. Sincerely, Frank Pizzo, Director for the Parks and Recreation.
Thank you. And years ago, the township was able to provide the fireworks out of the general fund expenditures, but now we can't do that. And along the way, you and your staff have picked up a method of paying for it.
Yeah.
So go ahead and take the floor.
The method we found out is the generosity of organizations and businesses in our community. They have been dedicated for multiple years. I don't have the exact list on, but these names are staples in our community.
Would you like me to? give
Sure,
that?
you can mention them. Yeah.
So organizations recognized for the 2018 firework concert are Clinton Township Police Association, Clinton Township Fire Association, Green for Life Environmental, Nickel and Saff Incorporated, Plant Moran, Resurrection Cemetery, and York, Dolan, and Tomlinson.
Yeah, so I wanted to take a second to call them up here to give them this, if they're here, and if not, we told them we'd go to their offices, but I want to make sure I'm a walking advertisement for my partners, and these guys are key to our community, and I'm a resident of our community, I'm a department head that lives here, and I really appreciate that we get to have such a wonderful fireworks, and it could not be done. I say this over and over whenever I'm walking. And I know Mr. Cannon says we used to be able to do it, but we cannot do it without these partners in all our programs. And I want to make sure they're recognized. And I think it's really cool, too, that the police chief here is going to come on up and take the plaque for the police department, the police association. But these guys, this isn't the police department that cuts us a check. This is the union, the guys that come in to give us a check. So if you could pass that on to, it's Mr. Stafford, right?
Yes.
Officer Stafford?
And the union.
And the union. So thank you guys very much.
You have others here, too.
Yeah, we have others, yeah. But we're very fortunate because I want to just, again, I'm a walking billboard, but the police department, no, I got my own. Police department, they're there for us all the time. You know, before, back in the day, we didn't have to worry about some of the things that go on in the police department with their security on the grounds, the stuff they do behind the scenes that we don't even know, that we have a safe environment for all of our programs. Anywhere, Easter egg hunts, anything we do, the police are there, there's a presence, and they're involved. So we appreciate everything they do. And then another group close to home to us is our very own Paul Brower Jr. Come on up here, Paul. Fire department. This is the police fire department, the association. You guys have been doing this for, I don't know how many years. They've been our premier partner for many, many years. These guys, when they were going through tough times, and you know, I've been here a long time myself, 31 years. They were going through times where we didn't know if we were going to be able to keep our our fire department and keep guys there. And we had firemen up here wondering if they're going to be able to feed their families. And you guys here kept those jobs, brought them back, and then they're giving back to us all the time. So again, I want to thank you personally here on television and tell you guys thank you. Thank you again very much for everything. Again, I'm not sure if they're here, but I'm just going to talk about them. If they're here, I'm going to ask, is Don Beretta here at all? Oh, come on up. Okay, this is GFL, Green for Life Environmental. They came in a transition that was very difficult for our community. We had to reach out to them. Sorry, your name?
Mary Jo Van Ander.
Come up here and say that.
Hi, Mary Jo Van Ander, Bob, and trustees, it's always our pleasure to help you in
Yeah.
your beautiful community. I mean that.
But I appreciate it. Let me get you this here
Thank
really
you.
quick. Then I'm going to talk about the way.
Oh,
All right. So this organization came on in a difficult time of transition for our whole community, and they came in and stepped right up to the plate and said, we want to be there, and does everything for us. Don is fantastic. That's my contact.
that's great.
And we email, if we ask for a dumpster, anything, they're there, they're bringing it out. So we really appreciate that.
You have a
And
great community, and you deserve it.
All right, well,
Service you.
thank you very much. This next one is Nickel and Saff. So I've dealt with Steve Saff. I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with him. I never got to meet Senior. So this, I was very excited to meet. Steve Saff said, you're meeting the big guy. So, the big guy. So we really appreciate everything you've done for us over the years. I mean, they've not only do they represent us well, but they actually bring us forward and make sure we're doing things to make sure our risk management is done right in our day camp program. They're always up on everything. So Steve does a great job, and well, I know where you got it from.
As a resident here, it's my pleasure.
Well, we're very excited about that for you. Thank you very much. Just the way these organizations are, he already brought his check, so that's what I'm dealing with. And then is Dave Harrington here, by any chance? All right, well, Plant Moran has been there for us. They work with us all the time. So Dave's going to have another plaque in his office. Again, these organizations just step up, and some people say, well, they're just writing a check because they work with you. No, they're not. They don't have to do that. We actually have an ethics policy, too, but we've had one for 31 years in our department, and we don't work like that. And these groups that are saying, we want to be a part of this community, and I'm like, we're going to put your name on a banner. I don't really need a name on a banner. And I'm the one that lives in this community, and I see it every day. I want people to know who's writing checks for those fireworks and the stuff that's in our community, the quality of life, and that's why I'm making sure they get recognized. Again, Plant Moran, big hand for them.
Yes.
This group has sent me an email like 3 times in the last couple of days. They cannot make it. They want to be here. It's ironic, his name's Mike Scott. There's only 3 of them in the building right now. Resurrection Cemetery, a staple in our community. Unfortunately, I've had to visit there probably 3 times in the last few months. Lost my father and my mother in the last 18 months, and Resurrection is top notch with everything. Not only being there for families and then providing a check for a community event, but they open their gates and let people park in there for the fireworks. Bob knows that's been a big thing, and we're like, how many people are at this event? We don't know. You got to include Resurrection. They're parked everywhere. But Resurrection, again, another organization, years and years, they should be recognized over and over. They've worked with us to put in bike paths and trails to be connected. Everyone walks by there every day. And like I said, I had to visit it recently, and I got to see the other end of it, professional and wonderful with every family. So hats off to them. They are not going to be here today, though. Thank you, Resurrection.
They also partner with us on every day that we can possibly honor our veterans at the Veterans Memorial area.
Every program. Yeah, they're there for us. And then last but not least is our own Jack. Jack is there for us for everything, too. I try to call Jack. He doesn't always get back with me because he's so busy. But I reached out to him and said, well, I know he's going to be here. So York, Dolan, Tomlinson, they've all been a big staple in our community. They've been with us forever. You work with a lot of other communities that I know the recreation directors that work there personally, and they're so happy you are there to guide them and make sure they make the best practices, best decisions for their organizations. And again, York, Dolan, Tomlinson, a huge contributor to the fireworks. Thank you.
Okay, motion is in order to receive and file.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Okay, who made the motion? Because there was more than,
Said something too. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't-
who's the motion maker and who supported or seconded?
I said so moved.
West?
I
Okay,
don't-
And
yes,
Mr.
he
Pearl
did too.
supported it.
That's
all
fine.
right.
Roll call, please.
I'll have
Mrs.
to
West?
I'll have to speak up. Yes.
Well, it's just that there's
No,
quite a
you're
few that
fine,
say
you're
it at
fine.
the same time.
You're fine.
Mrs. West? You said-
Yes.
And Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melcher, yes, motion passes.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you. And you want to talk about this year's fireworks?
The next item is, I'm sorry, you want to
Nope,
read?
well,
Okay.
it's up to you. I can
Yeah,
read
it doesn't matter. The next item is just to officially announce the fireworks date, so I can put it, we have people in our community say, oh, we're not allowed to do fireworks, but the Township Parks and Recreation Department does. No, we do it the right way. We have to file with the state, we have to follow all the laws, so we're not just randomly firing fireworks up in the air. We work closely with the fire marshal, with the fire department, and part of that process, both of them need a signature from Ms. Meltzer. So, yes, that's why we're here today, so you can officially acknowledge to the state and to the fire marshal that our date is going to be set for July 10th. So that's what we're doing today.
Did you want to read the letter?
Yeah, I can read that, yep. Dear board members, thanks to the generosity of our many sponsors, the township will once again host our fireworks concert on July 10th, 2019. Wolverine Fireworks Display, Inc. will provide our fireworks display and submit the state permit. The appropriate insurance has been obtained from Wolverine Fireworks Display and will be sent to Mr. Steve Saff and Mr. Jack Dolan for review. To ensure the success of the program as well as the safety of our residents, police, fire, and MedStar have been contacted and will provide coverage as necessary. The Civic Center parking lot will be utilized as well as Erie Elementary and Chippewa Valley's ninth grade center parking lots. A shuttle will provide transportation to the Civic Center site from both off-site locations. St. Paul of Tarsus will allow parking at their site based upon availability. Sincerely, Frank Pizzo, Director for the Clinton Township Parks and Recreation.
And Mr. Pizzo keeps a very close eye on our donors' money by having it on the 10th instead of on the 4th, because he gets a much better price.
More fireworks.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. And I'd also like to thank Frank for stepping up and doing this project every year. It was a thrill to go there and see it so organized and so well-attended, and everything was running great. And I'm just thrilled for the community. Thank you for everything you do.
Is there a second?
Support.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes, motion passes.
Thank you. And item 6 is a special land use for a massage therapy facility.
This commission has held public hearing on the proposal for special land use, being a massage therapy facility in the B2 Community Business District on the subject property located east of Hayes, north of Uthers, in the Oakwood Plaza, and has made review of the request. We hereby make recommendation for approval of the special land use to permit development of a massage therapy facility in the B2 District, Ultimate Thai Massage. This action was supported by a unanimous vote, and a copy of the notice of the April 8th, 2019 public hearing containing legal description and a sketch of location of the land in question is attached for your information and file. This matter was petitioned by Ms. Naritsara Felk, 6249 Trumbull Road, St. Clair Township, Michigan 48079. We submit this proposal for consideration and would appreciate advisement of your determination. Sincerely, Catherine Cherry, Secretary. Excuse me, one moment. I lost my page. Catherine Cherry, Secretary for the Clinton Township Planning Commission.
You know, this is a 3-step process, and this is just one of the steps this evening. They have to get a license from the clerk, and they also have to get a C of O. What we're talking about tonight is simply the special land use, and according to our planning director, there is no reason not for us to grant them this request. And they still would have to have it contingent upon those other 2 issues being taken care of.
Mr. Gannon, if I can just add for clarification, and you explained that well, but I wanted the public to know that when the normal process is that a petitioner for this industry would come to the clerk's office first, and then we do a police background check on that, and then they would go to the review here for planning. That didn't happen this time. They chose, and it's up to them, but they were advised to come to the clerk's office first. And the reason for that is that it would help mitigate costs. If there's anything associated in criminal background on this, especially in this issue, we would not be in the position of approving them as we will be asked to in once they process their application. This is not to approve their application for a permit for the massage license. This is only to approve the special land use for a facility there.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions of board members? The floor is open to approve the special land use.
Motion to approve based upon the contingency stated of approval from the police department and approval from the clerk's office pending those
And
investigations.
building.
And to see a vote.
And the building department with a certificate of occupancy. And wasn't there also a name change in this?
Yeah, you know what, I was just going to mention, it's Siam, not Ultimate Tie. It's SIAM, Siam.
Okay, so with that name change as well.
Support. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes, motion passes.
Thank you. And item 7 is the proposed CDBG 2019-2020 budget.
I believe Mr. Arman, you're going to give the presentation. Okay.
Okay, my name is Matt Wallace. I'm the Assistant Director for the Planning and Community Development Department. And each year we have to prepare a proposed budget for the Community Development Block Grant. This year, at this date, we haven't received a budget for the program through Congress. And when we do that, we just presume that the budget will be the same roughly as last year. Last year it was 561,325, so I built this budget based on 561,000. One big difference you'll notice this year is we have an additional program income or stream of revenue for the grant. That would be rent, which is considered program income from Heritage Estates. And that comes in as program income that goes back into the grant because grant funds were used to develop that property. And based on numbers given to me by the finance department, this year that number is 38,800. And that, the nice thing about that is that's money we have. That's not an estimate, so there's no real chance of, budgeting 38,800 and then them coming back in September and saying, we made a mistake, it's only 34,000. That's money that's in the account. So we can program those funds just like we do the rest of the grant. And so with that extra money, that carries over to extra money we're allowed to put into administration of the grant and extra money we can spend on the public service portion of the grant. The administration is capped at 20% of the grant plus program income. So with that extra roughly $8,000, we're going to implement a fair housing testing program. And I'd just like to reiterate or state that we don't have any complaints or reason to believe there is a fair housing problem. But, since we haven't been doing testing, we would like to initiate that just to make sure that there isn't a problem. And, that people aren't just don't know where to go to make complaints.
Mr. Wallace, would you just take a second, because I don't think everyone knows what that is. Would you just describe what a test would be?
Yeah. What that will be, I'm envisioning 3 parts of that $8,000. Most of it will be fair housing testing based on complaints. So if someone goes to rent an apartment and they believe that they were discriminated because they're one of the protected classes, such as disability, age, presence of children, race, religion. If they would make a complaint, and a Fair Housing Center, which I believe will be of Metropolitan Detroit, will do a test. They'll send out someone who is like a control group, who doesn't represent those protected classes, and, they'll be shown to have the same demographic data otherwise as the person who's claiming discrimination. And then, sometimes, based on the results, they either say evidence of discrimination or not. And then I'm expecting that there will also be an education portion for like realtors and landlords, to make sure that they're fully aware of their obligations as property owners who are in charge of fair housing. And then probably an ad or two in the paper, kind of reiterating the same thing about us being a fair housing community. And then if we move on to the public service programs, that's capped at 15% of the grant plus program income. So the program income we have here gives us about $6,000 extra that we can allocate, which is always nice because our requests for this category always far outweigh what we're able to give. And you'll, if you look up on the screen, you can see that we're giving to Parks and Rec like usual, Macomb Community Action, which is a home chore program for seniors and disabled, Care House, which offers counseling to children who are victims of abuse, Turning Point, which is for victims of domestic violence, and then the Macomb County Warming Center and MCREST, which is Macomb County Revolving Emergency Shelter
Team.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the rest of the budget is provided by departments here at the township. We were able to meet all the requests as far as activities, with the exception of like the degree of request from DPW. They presented us with choices that represented $1,050,000 in projects. And as you can see, we were able to accommodate a little over $275,000 of that. $225,000 coming into improvements at Normandy Park, and another $50,000 for handicap ramp improvements throughout the city. And then we have two projects going to the senior center, which is accommodating all of what they had requested for this year, and then $80,000 to continue the housing rehabilitation program, which, along with program income from old liens coming due, should be enough to accommodate requests for the 1920 program year.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions of Mr. Wallace of the board members? Members of the community? Let me just start by saying this is not enough. Years ago, there was more money. From time to time, there's talk about cutting out CDBG entirely. That would be a disaster for communities like ours that put it to very good use, and we can point every year to the benefits that our community receives from this money. It's very difficult to cut out requests. But when you only can give 15% to the one group, you've given them the total 15%. And that's by statute. Any comments from the community? Pastor Bradley?
Pastor Bradley, 2645 Quinn Road. I was looking at the breakdown there, and I was wondering if there's been any requests made from the community center on Village Road in terms of any need.
I don't believe there has been any.
I can speak to that.
Yes,
Thank you. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
We don't need anything right now, even though we did have some pipes rupture in the building, and we will be having some of that fixed. So
Okay.
everything
So
else, wouldn't you know, the pipes pipes rupture right after you get things done.
Right.
So we have actually really built it up, it really looks nice, and then we have some damage in.
Nothing in terms of recreational,
No, not right now, no.
Okay.
You watch, though.
all right,
Keep your eyes open.
thank you.
But the recreation part, Pastor Bradley, comes from the Parks and Rec Department.
Okay.
And they service Robbie Parker and several
I
other.
just remember that some years ago, many years ago, when it came to these funds, the Village Road Community Center didn't receive any funds, and then it was requested, and I think some funds went to them. And so, I mean, if there was no request made, there's nothing
Right.
that can be done.
Yeah.
And that's why I was asking the question. Was there any request made?
Well, plus,
And there-
we've been in a little bit of flux. We still want to be able to tear everything down and rebuild with the RAD grant.
Yes.
That you were at that meeting last year.
Yes.
So we're still looking at trying to do that and see if there's other monies that we can find out there, so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But thank you for alerting us again,
Okay.
so.
Further comments or questions? The floor is open for a motion. Yes, Mr. Wallace?
I'd just also like to point out, this is actually the commencement of the 30-day public comment period that we have to complete in order to approve this in roughly 30 days and send it to the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
What motion are you looking for this evening?
No motion today. I just wanted to, I guess maybe a motion to commence the comment period
Okay.
and to establish a public hearing, whatever meeting is closest to 30 days from now.
Well-
I'm not
Gilliam?
sure.
So, Mr. Wallace, you did start out by saying that you're not sure what the allocation is going to be from the federal government yet, so.
Yeah, there-
So this is based upon last year's budget, and you're assuming that it's going to be similar or the same as last year?
Right, and
Okay.
the notice that we put in the paper has provisional language that addresses whether it's higher or lower, how we'll handle it. Like, for example, administratively, it would just be reduced a straight percentage. Same thing with public services. Each program would be cut back or increased by the percentage that the grant changed. And then for the department programs, the handicap ramps, since we have 165,000 out from last year that we haven't spent yet, the handicap ramps would be reduced first. If the reduction was more than 50,000, then it would come out of the Normandy Park project.
Okay.
But that's an important distinction to be made.
Mr.
Thank you.
Cannon,
Mr. Dolan?
and is the public hearing date to be set lesser than 30 days or no more than 30 days?
No less than 30 days.
So that'd be the 28th.
The 28th, yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
That's
wasn't
okay.
sure what the
Yep.
date was.
May 28th.
Okay. And that's contingent on us having a budget before, we're not allowed to send, you used to be able to send your action plan to Congress before a budget, and you could just adjust it accordingly, but they don't want you to do that anymore, that you have to wait for Congress to set a budget.
So you need a motion to commence the 30-day comment period and for us to receive and file and approve the contingency plan based upon funding.
And set a date. you
Yes.
said, Right?
And set the date for the 28th?
Yes,
May.
28th of May.
Bless you.
Okay,
yes.
Is that your
thank you.
motion?
so moved.
Supported by Mr. Aragona.
Bless you.
Bless you.
A motion by Mr. Gilliam, supported by Mr. Aragona.
Yeah,
Roll call,
me.
please.
Thank you. Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes, I
Mr.
just have a
Keys?
question at the end.
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon? Mrs. Melter, yes, motion passes.
Mrs. West?
Can they comment by sending an email or something to
Mr.
their
Wallace?
office, to his office?
You have Mr. Wallace?
Okay.
Mr. Wallace is our Assistant Planning Director, and comments can be directed right to him in his office.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is still it's still able to be changed right up until,
Right.
we can approve it the 28th after making a change at that same meeting.
Okay, I was just wondering if what the viewing public, how they can get a hold of
Yeah,
you.
and-
Hopefully, maybe Jim, at least on the second, the recordings, the whatever you call them, that he can put the email and phone number up.
And perhaps Mr. Wallace can announce
Oh, there you go.
where he wants to
His
do
number.
that right now? Phone number, email address?
Any comments or suggestions or questions are welcome. You can reach me by email at m.wallace@clintontownship-mi.gov or by phone at 586-723-8084.
Just,
And that's on the
Thank you.
website.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 8, approval of the purchase of 2 Ford Escapes.
Dear Honorable Board members, I'm writing to request approval of the purchase of 2 2019 Ford Escape SE vehicles. The vehicles will be purchased through the 2019 Vehicle Macomb County Contract Bid Pact. The vendor will be Signature Ford. The cost of the vehicles will be $43,548, which has been allotted for the 2019-20 budget cycle. We will be replacing a 2003 Ford Explorer with 177,000 miles and a 2006 Ford Explorer with 130,000 miles, which also has a transmission issue. Should you have any questions or concerns regarding this matter, please feel free to contact me at any time. Sincerely, Tim Duncan, Clinton Township Fire Chief.
Thank you. Neither of these vehicles that we're replacing has any real salvage value other than scrap, so it's not worth putting money into.
Move to approve the request.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second, but if I could, just want to inform the public. So when these things come before us, this is part of a purchase plan with the county, because it says the county here, but it's actually through Mitten, which is a statewide purchasing plan with vendors, and Signature Ford happens to be the main fleet vehicle dealer within the state of Michigan, and they have an established relationship. The prices are set through the Mitten state purchasing process, and that way we know we're getting the best deals on these vehicles.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
Mrs. West.
Yes.
Mr. Keys.
Yes.
Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Aragona.
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 9 is request approval to attend the annual Michigan Water Environment Association Conference.
Dear members of the board, I'm requesting board approval to attend the annual in-state 2019 Michigan Water Environmental Association Conference. This training is being held at Boyne Resort, Boyne Falls, Michigan, June 23rd to the 26th, 2019. This is a budgeted item. Thank you for your prompt consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Charles Belmore, Assistant Superintendent of Water and Sewer.
The reason it's before the board, it's over $1,000, but it is required for him to keep his certifications, which are very necessary in his position.
I'll make the motion. Support.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cannon, just so the public knows, that total estimated cost is $1,485.46.
Thank you.
Mr. Aragona.
Yes.
Mr. Keys.
Yes.
Mrs. West.
Yes.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 10, request approval to purchase 2 replacement vehicles for the Water and Sewer Department meter shop.
Dear members of the board, attached you will find quotes for 2 replacement vehicles for the Water Department meter shop. We have contacted the vendor, and they have agreed to honor the prices offered through the Michigan Intergovernmental Trade Network, or Mitten, as solicited by Macomb County for 2 2019 Ford vans. In accordance with the township purchasing and bid policies, we recommend awarding the vehicle purchases to Signature Ford for $62,268 for 2 2019 Ford Transit 250 vans. These are budgeted purchases. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Sincerely, Charles Belmore, Assistant Superintendent of Water and Sewer.
And as Mr. Gilliam pointed out earlier, these are bid through Mitten, so we are getting the best price possible. The vehicles they're replacing are, again, in very desperate need of replacing.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gilliam.
Yes.
Mrs. West.
Yes.
Mr. Keys.
Yes.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mr. Cannon.
Yes.
Mr. Aragona.
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 11 is Ethics Board's posting.
Dear board members, in accordance to Section 7, page 13 of the ethics policy adopted on March 25, 2019, an ethics board must be created. The initial members of the ethics board shall be appointed for 1-, 2-, and 3-year terms of office, respectively, beginning on a date established by the board. It is my recommendation that the posting in accordance with our 60-day timeline dates are as follows. Deadline to receive application will be June 21st, 2019. The introduction of the applicants will be held July 15th, 2019 board meeting, and the appointment of those applicants July 29th, 2019, at a board meeting. Terms will begin on July 30th, 2019, and it is my recommendation that the Ethics Board posting be approved as presented. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Sincerely, Stephanie Middlestead, Administrative Assistant.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions?
Bob Hogan, 36755 Bar Street, Clinton Township. On the subsection, or the section 7, subsection A, it states that a Board of Ethics is created consisting of 3 members. Subsection 2, the second sentence, members should not be elected officials, persons appointed to the elective office, full-time appointed officials, township employees, nor shall they currently be serving on any township committee or commission. My statement is, I am currently a member of the Compensation Committee. My question is, would I have to resign the Compensation Committee commission if I apply for the Board of Ethics, or if I was one of the successful candidates that became a member of the Board of Ethics, would that action automatically remove me from a member of the Compensation Committee? In other words, what I am trying to say, this is, I think, the only committee that doesn't allow you to be a committee on a member of another committee. And I would like to be a member on this, or I'd like to at least submit my form, but if it's going to jeopardize myself in the Compensation Committee, then I choose not to.
Mr. Cannon,
Yes.
you would have to make an election if you were chosen to be appointed. So if you were given notice that you were going to be presented to the board for appointment on the Ethics Board, at that point in time, you would have to resign from the Local Officials Compensation Commission. But you would not be required to resign from the Local Officials Compensation Commission merely because you were applying. In other words, there'd have to be some indication that you were about to be selected before you would have to be resigned. You just can't serve 2 masters, is what I'm saying. But
Right.
you can seek another office and still be in the first office. There's nothing that, the way it's drafted, prohibits you from seeking that position, but you thereafter can't remain in your former position.
Perfect. I want to serve the community on one of the committees, but I did not want to resign on one to find out I'm not the successful candidate on the other. That's what it was for. The second of the 2 issues are, can anyone on the 3-member Board of Ethics be a spouse, brother, sister, mother, father, daughter of an elected official, persons appointed to an elective office, full-time officials, or township employee? In other words, could the 3 people that are on the township trustee meeting, could they have their spouses on this commission?
I don't believe that would be in the best interest of anyone.
I know it wouldn't be, but I was wondering, is it allowed?
Mr. Cannon, would you like me to address that?
Certainly.
That issue is not specifically addressed in the body of the ethics policy, but I think, Mr. Cannon, we have some, what I consider to be pretty informed and astute elected officials. I don't think the elected officials, with the spirit of the ethics policy, would appoint someone who bears one of those relationships.
Very good, that's what I was hoping for.
Thank you. Do we have a motion on the floor, Mrs. Meltzer?
We do not.
Now move that we approve the ethics policy board creation posting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 12, adoption of Township Ordinance 452, odor control.
Mr. Cannon, this was introduced at the last board meeting. It's appropriate for the board to motion to have this approved as presented.
Okay, let me just review, because I think there's been some confusion. This is not intended to catch people smoking marijuana in their backyard. I think that some people thought that was the case. This is more designed to catch buildings where there may be an excess of marijuana being grown. People are allowed to grow marijuana in their homes, especially if they have their medical marijuana card. They can grow their allotment. Or you can have someone who can grow up to 72 plants if they're a caregiver. But 72 plants in 200 square feet in a home in Clinton Township is dangerous. So what you end up with is electrical problems, water problems, people who are doing things with insulation in their homes that if there were a fire would kill them in less than a minute because of the toxic fumes. That's what this is basically for, is to, if a complaint is given to the building department, they will go out and smell and see if there is an odor at the property line of the complainant's area. If they believe there is a problem, they will then take this machine that they are now going to buy, and they will take it out and monitor and test to see what the level of marijuana is coming from that home. And if there's a problem, we will get first of all, people who are growing marijuana don't want township officials in their home. 99% of the time, they say, no, you cannot enter my premise. So we would have to get a warrant for their going into the homes. If we go into the homes with that warrant, which we will if necessary, we will then, to the extent of the law, make sure that they only have the amount of marijuana that they are allowed, A, and B, that it's done safely, not only for the people who occupy that particular home, but for the people who live in the neighborhoods around them. Now, 6 or 7 plants grown in a home, according to our building department, is not a problem. But more than that, you need special electrical installs, you need appropriate coverings on the walls, you need appropriate ventilations. There's a lot that has to be done, and you need permits to have all of this done properly. So you would have to get the building department involved to make sure that when you are growing your marijuana legally in your home, that it's done safely, not only for you, but for the neighborhood. That's what this is all about. This is not designed for someone to call and say, I smell marijuana down the street, please come and measure and see if there's marijuana in the area. That is not what this is about.
And isn't this also other smells? I mean, like
Yes.
Unidig? and,
Yes.
You know, I hate to say Unidig, but all of those kind of things.
Yep.
Somebody who's got compost that's gone awry. So I think just zooming in on marijuana
Yes.
is a little,
Well,
but.
that's what
right.
pushed us to
Right, that's
purchase
what
this
pushed us to
machine.
get it.
And again, you're allowed to, in your home, with the proper credentials, grow in 200 square feet marijuana. That is the law, whether I like it, or you like it, or dislike it. That is what we have to abide by. Yes, sir.
Sam Bushel, 18546 Wayland Drive. And I realize why Mrs. West tried to, save the board on this. Your speech tonight makes this obviously an ordinance strictly going after one particular thing. And I'm sure the attorney can tell you that doesn't fly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
the
Dolan?
ordinance speaks for itself. The ordinance does not indicate that it's utilized solely to regulate marijuana. It's used to regulate odors.
Yes.
So I don't.
But what a lot of
Ordinance
people-
as presented, I believe, is a lawful ordinance, and I think that our enforcement will ultimately be lawful. But obviously, it can be used and should be used, whatever the source of the odor is, if it's sufficient so that it's generating a complaint.
When this was introduced 2 weeks ago, I think there was a lot of interest generated and concern that we were looking for people who are smoking marijuana. That is not the purpose of this. Mr. Keys?
Yeah, just as a clarification for myself, you're not actually looking for any amendment or approval to purchase the equipment. Right now, we're just passing the ordinance, and then later on, we'll be more educated on the piece of equipment and what we'll be purchasing.
Well, I believe that at the last meeting, there was information furnished to you, and you're welcome to discuss it further with Mr. Miller, who is not here this evening. There in fact is equipment that he has identified, and it's essentially similar to or the same equipment that Denver uses. And we had estimated an expense of less than $10,000. The piece of equipment itself, I believe, is less than $3,000. Some of the additional funds would be for replacement parts and then additionally for training. And I believe that $10,000 included training for up to 5 individuals. So, but he will be providing more information, which I'm sure you can either speak to him, he can email that to you, or
He is continuing to look at other
Thank you.
pieces. Mr. Furl?
At this time, I'll move that we adopt this ordinance as introduced.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there input from the community?
And this is just informational for me because I was kind of surprised when we got to the marijuana side of it. And I'm from the old school. Someone can just decide that they want to buy marijuana, go out and buy it and bring it into their house and smoke it, and that's legal?
Yes.
If they have a card.
No.
No,
this is-
not anymore. Not with recreation passing.
But they can't, but there's no place to buy the recreation.
They can grow. So
Anyone.
under the 2008 ballot language.
The what?
The 2008 ballot proposal.
Yes.
Back from 2008. It's in a sense right now called the caregiver model.
Okay.
Somebody can either, if they have a medical card, they can grow their own or they can assign themselves to a caregiver. And so they can either grow their own 12 plants or have somebody grow 12 plants for them. If you're a caregiver, you can grow for like yourself and 5 other people, so that's why there's a total of 72 plants. However, Clinton Township has an ordinance that says that if it's an existing home and it's occupied, I believe it's occupied, we can only do 200
Or
square feet.
unoccupied also.
Or, yeah, so either occupied or unoccupied, only 200 square feet can be used for the actual grow area. But when there's that many plants, and even 200 square feet, it can produce some pretty noxious odors. And so people who want to do this, it's legal, it's lawful, but they have to take the steps to make sure that it is not a nuisance created for their neighbors.
Okay, just for clarification then, from you to me, can anyone just decide that they want to go and buy some marijuana, or I'm sorry, grow some marijuana in their house, period?
Now with the provisions of the recreational use law,
No, not recreational.
yeah, but with recreation passing, they
Okay,
can.
All right, I need to learn more about the law then.
There's a huge landscape here of 3 different laws that are interacting with each other that were, either passed by the voters or adopted at different times.
That
And
has
it
nothing
is
to do
a-
with the township.
Well, so it was either passed by the voters or the state legislature, and it's a very difficult issue for the township to figure out how we navigate these
Okay.
3 different laws that don't work well together with one another.
All right, thank you.
Pastor Bradley, on May 22nd at the main branch of the
That was going to
library,
be my question when we got to the next agenda item.
there's going to be an educational forum.
Okay.
6 people who are going to educate about the benefits of marijuana and 3 who are going to advocate against it.
All right, thank you.
And we're going to film it and broadcast that also.
All right. All right, thank you. Where's that going to be at?
The Clinton Macomb Public Library, main branch.
Thank you.
It's been moved and supported. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melter, yes, motion passes.
Thank you. And item 13, adoption of Township Ordinance 453, restricting marijuana-controlled substances.
Again, Mr. Cannon, this was introduced at the last meeting and is appropriate for, to adopt at this, to make a motion to
And what
adopt.
this says is, the ordinance, this is an ordinance that indicates that presently says that business operations are not permitted in Clinton Township.
Wait, are you doing
Yeah, no.
453? I'm
No,
sorry.
we're at 13.
we on
13.
13.
I'm sorry.
We're on the police one.
I'm on
No,
13, 453.
Yes, ordinance 453,
I'm sorry.
restricting marijuana-controlled substances.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Support.
Mr. Cannon, let me just give a very quick synopsis on this. All we're doing here is we're replicating the state law that currently exists on the subject of the consumption and possession and use of marijuana, the various penalties that the voters approved in November that are incorporated into the state law, we're creating that as a local ordinance. By way of example, there are state laws on drunk driving. The township locally replicates those state laws in ordinance form. The reason we do that is our police department does the enforcement work, and when we charge under the local ordinance as opposed to state law, we see a return to the community of the resources that we spent in enforcement action through the fines and costs that are received that we wouldn't get if it was charged under state law. So all we're doing here is we're mirroring the state law as it applies to marijuana as adopted in November into ordinance form that already exists as a law at the state level.
In other words, we're not moving forward, but it's not cast in stone that we would not move forward at another point in time.
Well, that's on the next matter,
That's on the
That's the
next
next
Oh,
one still.
which is the prohibition of establishments.
all right. Further questions? Roll call, please.
I'm sorry, who supported that? Who was the second?
We have a
I
motion.
don't think we had a motion.
Well,
yeah, we had a
Mr. Keys made the motion.
Oh, I did, yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
he made the motion, but who seconded?
I didn't hear.
Mr.
who made
Mr.
this.
Pearl? Okay, thank you.
Wait, and then we have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sam Bushel, 18546 Wayland Drive. So just so as people at home understand this is to protect the revenue stream of the township collecting monies.
No,
No,
Yeah,
no, it's,
yeah.
no, sir.
I think that's an oversimplification of it. What it is if you look around the state, you'll find, for example, by way of comparison with drunk driving enforcement, that at the 90-day misdemeanor level and below, that the enforcement is almost always done by, when it's done by local police departments, that it's done under local ordinance. The reason that that happens is that the resources at the county level and the county prosecutor's office additionally are dedicated more towards more serious offenses, felonies, and so on. We do it at the local level for two reasons. Number one, we get better, we actually use our resources that we pay for at the local level.
No, excuse me,
That our
450.
taxpayers are paying for. So we feel that to our
455.
taxpayers, we owe an obligation to recoup the money locally here rather than see it go off to the state and to the county.
Well, that's what I'm saying, the revenue stream, the money's coming back, will come back to the township rather, it's the
That's the
revenue
first
stream.
part, sir. But
They
then the
slipped the
second
part
part
in there.
is that there is not the amount of enforcement activity and the resources at our level are greater to act as a deterrent and stop those kinds of crimes than if we didn't do it. So
Yes.
there's really two prongs to it.
Oh, and then
Okay.
the first prong gives you the revenue to the other part.
Correct.
It's a revenue stream, yes.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melser, yes, motion passes.
Thank you. Now we have item 14, which is adoption of Township Ordinance 454, parking enforcement.
Again, this was introduced at the last meeting. It is appropriate to adopt at this meeting.
This is to allow the mall, as well as our hospitals, to be trained by our police department to write parking tickets when necessary. You can be sure that neither wants to write any parking tickets, so it probably will be very egregious before they do, because they want to invite people to come to their parking lots, as opposed to try to keep them away. This has been done before with Macomb Community College very successfully. Mr. Keys?
Just a quick question, and I don't know if it's been done the exact same way in the past. I was under the impression that in the ordinance, we would actually lay out the business's name that we would be having this arrangement with. It seems to me more like we have the flexibility to pick any of these businesses that come to us, and we're able to give them proper training, and then they would be able to take advantage of this resource. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Dolan?
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Support.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melser, yes, motion passes.
Okay, item 15, adoption of Township Ordinance 455.
Again, this was introduced at the last meeting, and it would be appropriate for the board to make a motion to approve or deny.
So moved to adopt.
Is there a second?
Oh,
We need a second.
Second.
Okay.
And if we could just have Mr. Dolan provide an explanation, I think that's in order.
Now, this is the ordinance that we're adopting based on the ballot measures that were approved in November. Under this ordinance, what we're saying in the preamble is that at this time, based on the way that ballot language occurred, we're going to enact an ordinance prohibiting recreational marijuana establishments. The reason we're doing that is that unlike, for example, the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act, where the township would have to undertake legislative action before the board to opt in, we have to opt out, or we could end up in a situation if the state enacted rules and we had yet to act, in a position where potentially marijuana establishments could go forward without our regulation and direct approval. What occurred when the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act was passed is we had to wait a long time for the state to enact rules. When they finally did, they had overlapped a lot of the work that we did, looking at potential areas of regulation. So what we're doing here is we're saying, for the time being, we are not going to allow any marijuana establishments. These would be businesses that are selling recreational marijuana at retail. Now, this is not to say that this forever will be a policy of the township, but that's the ordinance that we're now adopting. And in part, that's occurring because at this point, the state has not enacted any rules to show us exactly what they're doing with respect to recreational marijuana. And so at this point in time, we are acting to prohibit recreational marijuana establishments so that we don't find ourselves in a situation where if the state acted quickly, we might find ourselves having to accept establishments. If we feel at a later point in time that it's appropriate to change our viewpoint on that and to allow marijuana establishments in one form or another, this ordinance could be, at that point in time, modified to allow that.
Thank you. Mrs. Meltzer?
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. There is a lot about this, this issue that, is still, we're still very much in the dark in terms of what direction we're going. So this is just playing it safe for Clinton Township and allowing us to be proactive. However, Mr. Cannon, if I can ask Mr. Dolan, and Mr. Dolan, I apologize, and did not ask you this ahead of time if you don't have the answers, but I think it's important to know, would there be, or is there any regulation on establishments that are medically in business to sell commercially? Would they then be limited by a 2-year, I'm going to call it a moratorium or a bar of being able to actually sell marijuana recreationally for a 2-year period? I was told that establishments, even if we allowed recreational sales of marijuana, that couldn't take place until 2 years after they sold the medicinal. Is that
I haven't
factual
heard anything
or-
along those lines. The only thing I had heard and saw myself in reviewing the ballot language in the state law was that if you already had an approved medical marijuana facility that was selling medical marijuana at a retail level to patients who had a medical marijuana card, that location would be then considered as approved under the new act. Now, we don't have that situation. We don't have any approved locations under the Medical Marijuana Facilities Act for retail sales at this time. So we don't, that issue is what I'll call it, because there are two schools of thought on it. Doesn't exist here.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sam Bushel, 18546 Wayland Drive. I just wanted to point out, all these marijuana laws we're working on tonight and prohibitions and paying to have them posted and such, this is all on actually, the citizens in Clinton Township overwhelmingly approved recreational marijuana in November. So this is all things that these are all prohibitions that they're now paying for against their votes. Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments from the community?
I make a point of a clarification while this gentleman's coming up, if I could, Mr. Cannon. I think what we're saying here tonight with the passage of this is to say the state hasn't promulgated the rules yet. Until the state promulgates the rules, we're saying no, because we don't know what the regulatory landscape is. And so, state, provide us rules, then we think we can fairly consider it. But if we don't do this tonight, the state does promulgate rules, we don't like the rules, and we hadn't taken the action that we took, or that we're about to take, the state could simply say, yes, it's permitted here.
Mr. Cannon?
That's, I think, it in a nutshell. And so this is a fail-safe measure until the state does what they are supposed to do and what they've said that they're going to do.
I know the gentleman's there. Just real quick. Originally, it was supposed to be December 6th of this year is when they would come out with the rules. At this juncture, it's looking more like it's going to be June 6th. They're moving ahead really fast. And that's not just a little bit.
Yes, sir.
I just had a quick question. I'm Peter Viviano, 38374 Saddle Lane, Clinton Township, Michigan. And the prohibition on medical marijuana and establishment selling, how does that affect growing? I mean, they seem to be growing, 200 square feet in the home, but outside of that, what are the ordinances for growing in commercial districts and light industrial districts?
Mr. Dolan, why don't you clarify that, please?
Currently, right now, that whole area is what I'll call somewhat in a state of flux. We have an ordinance that only would permit the growth of marijuana within a residential setting in 200 square feet or less. There have been some court decisions that have indicated that that type of restriction is not consistent with the first act, the original act where medical marijuana was approved following the ballot measure and that established the caretaker and patient model. However, one of those cases that said that regulatory ordinance provisions like ours weren't permitted has now been approved by the Supreme Court for argument on an application to go to the Michigan Supreme Court. So the arguments on that case have not occurred yet. So it appears to us that there's a very good chance that there may be modifications of that Court of Appeals decision. So the way attorneys talk is we say, has there been a final decision? Have all appeals been exhausted? Has a court made a final decision so that we know that there aren't changes that may be made by courts on that subject? The answer to that is no, because as I mentioned, Supreme Court has before it one of those cases. So at this point, our limitations are under our ordinance, 200 square feet residential only, and we have a situation where we've got the Court of Appeals decisions. There's actually two of them that have occurred, but one case, and they both have the same issue, is now been accepted for argument on application for leave. So we've got the Supreme Court we know is going to look at that issue, and some further decision will be made by that court.
Aren't ordinances designed by the city, by the township?
I beg your pardon?
Aren't ordinances decided by the township, like?
They're adopted. They're legislative acts by the township board.
Correct. So currently, is there any areas in Clinton Township that can be used to grow?
I just mentioned it.
You did.
Up to 200 square feet.
Just in your house, but no commercial, no
There
light
aren't-
industrial
There aren't commercial and industrial areas that are approved for growth at this time.
at this time.
Right.
And if that comes under further consideration, at what time would that be?
Well, I think we're all waiting to see what the Supreme Court's going to do, because the Supreme Court could do one of a number of things. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Swimming in mud.
Well, exactly. Until they make a decision, though, we don't know what direction they'll go.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you very much.
One very quick clarification. Medical marijuana sales were approved in 2008, and Clinton Township has no medical marijuana sales places. And I think with these ordinances that you're doing, I think you're hoping for the same thing. It's, we have an awful lot of empty businesses on Groesbeck that could use some business. Thank you.
Well, actually, in 2008, to be correct, what was approved was the patient caregiver model. When you say sales, to the extent you're suggesting that someone could grow marijuana and sell it to somebody, what was permitted was a patient could grow it for themselves, or a caregiver who is properly licensed could grow it only for those up to 6 patients.
Right. And there again, Clinton Township has no place, so.
So 5 patients in themselves.
Good evening, Township Board. Anthony Penna, resident of Clinton Township for 39 years, located now 37380 Willow Lane. I have seeking some clarification on behalf of my family, a lot of neighbors. I think there's some confusion going on. And Mr. Dolan, if I could potentially address some questions to you as well as the board.
Well, the questions would all come here, then.
Absolutely. So it's my understanding there's this new law, recreational law that took effect, and you have essentially 2 options. One, you could opt out, or 2, you can allow certain marijuana uses, and you can regulate the number within your municipality. So you got 2 options. And if you don't do something, I completely understand problems can occur. So I guess it's my understanding that the township is taking a position where they're temporarily opting out until kind of the dust settles with the state legislation. That's as I understand it. And, I know there has been cities like Warren, Centerline, Lenox Township that have opted in, and they've put restrictions, and they implemented ordinances, and it's working for them. Mm-hmm. And there's townships that have clearly opted out. Shelby Township, for example, Washington Township. But it looks like this board is trying to potentially determine what direction to go. The concern that I have is with the understanding that we're temporarily opting out. In one breath, we're saying that. However, in that same breath, I'm hearing specific locations being identified for dispensaries and for grow facilities. So if in fact there is locations being identified, it would almost seem as if you're not waiting for, the state to implement their rules or their guidelines. So I think if you could provide some clarification on whether or not there's locations that are already being identified, I think maybe you can dispel some of these rumors, because some of them are very concerning. There's locations that are right adjacent to residential or apartments, and they're caught in between a church and a school. I mean, I can't imagine that this board would allow something like that and not implement. I mean, if you're going to opt in, and it's a tough decision. It's your decision, and I don't envy, your position. But I think if you're going to opt in, you need to make sure that obviously there's certain restrictions and guidelines in place. Make sure that, we implement some proper planning. I know a lot of you have been on this board for a long time, and you're well aware of what proper land use planning is all about. You don't put certain uses next to others. And I think that's what some residents are very concerned about. So, having said that, I think we're looking forward to to this potential debate or that's coming up on the 22nd. But I just hope that we're not already identifying locations when we're supposed to have a free and open debate.
It won't be a debate, it will be informational.
Sure.
Bob Hogan, 36755 Bar Street. Is there any revenue that we're going to get out of, is the township going to get out of this marijuana?
Not at this time.
A year from now, if we opted in, I guess the word
There would be
was.
some revenue. I don't know how much it is. I think that keeps changing also. So there would be some revenues.
So, as you would expect, as the treasurer, I've run numbers on this. The state estimates that, first of all, everybody thinks that this is going to be the end-all, be-all, and provide all of the money to pave our streets to a smoothness that we've never seen, and it's going to single-handedly support education in the state of Michigan. And the reality is that's not true. The reality is the State House Fiscal Agency estimates that this is going to produce about $94.7 million in revenue off of the 10% excise tax on recreational marijuana. Let me also back up and say that there's also the Medical Marijuana Act law that was a 3% excise tax. Once recreation passed, 90 days after the passage of recreation, the 3% revenue on medical marijuana goes away completely, gone, doesn't exist anymore. So all we have in terms of that is a $5,000 annual licensing fee and then a total statewide of $94.7 million. Of that $94.7 million, the first 2 years, there's $20 million off the top for studies to support marijuana treatment for veterans. So that's like a 2 or 3 year study that the state has identified, and this being the revenue stream for it. Then 15% is automatically earmarked for the school aid fund. So the overall school aid fund is $15 billion. This will provide it about $14 million. 15% of the marijuana 10% excise tax is earmarked for the Michigan Transportation Fund. The Michigan Transportation Fund is a $5 billion fund. So there again, another $14 million for the Transportation Fund. Then the remaining revenue after that is split between the state, the county, and the local communities. So if you take that portion of the pot that's left over, of that $94.7 million, with all those other earmarks that I just mentioned, and the state approves 500 licenses of all these different types of facilities, and Clinton Township were to approve 5, it would mean about $120,000 for Clinton Township on an annual basis, which is about the equivalent of a full-time police officer, one. So that's my analysis of the numbers based upon the numbers that have been provided to me from the House Fiscal Agency up in Lansing.
Very good, perfect. The next question is, I heard the number 200 square feet, which is 10 feet by 20 feet. Do you need a permit for that, or how's someone going to make sure that they didn't go another 100 foot or something?
No, you don't need a permit.
Well, then there's no way to control that exact.
The only way to control it is the way I described earlier with that. If we have a machine and we get complaints, first we check it with our noses and from the building department, then with the machine. And if there is a problem and we don't get correction, we want correction first before we take any other steps, then we get a warrant so that we can enter the home to see how many square feet and how many plants they actually have.
So there'd be no permits for electrical, water,
No,
or
you
anything
would-
on that?
That's
Okay.
part of the problem. And that's why the building department is interested in making sure that we don't have people growing 70 plants in their home, because it's dangerous.
Yes. Okay, very good, thank you.
Those numbers that Paul gave were pretty interesting, but that doesn't even cover the additional cost to the city for legalizing marijuana. You have additional costs in police enforcement, additional cost in treatment for the addicts?
We don't know about the treatment, but we do know that right now, we have a problem with police enforcement. The police department has to patrol our neighborhoods, and they too are having trouble with these homes that are growing too much marijuana. And I suspect, and I've heard many of our officers say, they think that where the kids are getting their marijuana is from these people who are growing in their homes, some legally, some illegally. And that's what I think I know myself, that's what I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of people growing in the homes, selling to kids on the street.
I just wanted to emphasize, that's a good point as well, but the point I was trying to make, that this is like, everybody's talking about how much money this is going to bring into the city and how good it's going to be. I just don't think it's actually going to transfer equitably as they think because of the additional expenses that they're ignoring. The additional dealing with the new population that follows this law. I've been to Colorado many times, and you have a new class of homelessness, a new address of public loitering. It's a nuisance, and the people actually in Colorado wish they would have are regretting the vote. So I just wanted to acknowledge Paul's comments were interesting, but it's actually worse than that because it's also almost a net deficit in the long run.
Every expert I've heard has different sets of numbers, but none of the numbers are anywhere near what would make it easy to pave even one road. There just isn't that much money that's going to come to local communities.
All right, well, thank you.
Further comments? Mr. Keys?
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. And just because a lot was said tonight, I want to make my thoughts clear. I support opting out. We had this discussion when we talked about medical marijuana because we don't know what rules the state is going to put on us right now. Talking with our attorney, talking with the MTA, there's a lot of rules out there that I would not be comfortable with that are being lobbied in Lansing currently. And so I want to wait until I know what the board's going to look like before we opt in for Clinton Township residents. The only other thing I would say is I think it's important when we talk about this that we don't always villainize the caregivers. That is something that I in my research and training have changed my view on. And it's not that I want to increase it, and I definitely want to try to limit it in the homes and make sure that when it is in the home, we go through the proper permitting process because of the danger that I've seen from our building department and our building director showing me the photos. But I don't assume that every caregiver is selling to kids on the street either. We have to have a balance here. It has to be a civil debate. And so I appreciate the comments made, but just wanted to make my thoughts clear.
Thank you. Pastor Bradley?
Yes. One of the gentlemen just came up, stated that there were two municipalities that have opted out. Opted out means they have made the decision on a trustee in a township, if it was Shelby Township. Opt out means they've made the final decision that they don't want marijuana in their township. Is that what that means?
That does mean that, but they can also change.
No, yeah. So, do me
Mr. Dolan?
Yeah, let's make a couple things clear here. What we're talking about when we discuss opt-in, opt-out is the actual sale by a business of marijuana to the public at large. When they adopted in November, through ballot measures, recreational marijuana, in the state now, people can possess and consume marijuana as long as it's not in a public place.
And they're licensed?
Limited quantities.
Is it that they're licensed?
Pardon me? No, they don't need a license. They can possess marijuana up to 2.5 ounces.
Everybody in the township, if they want to?
Correct.
Okay.
And they can consume it if it's not in a public place. You can smoke it in your home, for example. So the laws change so that you can, regardless of whether you are a patient or caregiver under the former act, have marijuana. What is being discussed now is the establishment of businesses that sell marijuana. And Shelby Township, for example, opted out, meaning that they are not going to allow businesses into Shelby Township to sell marijuana. But whether it's Shelby Township, Clinton Township, or anywhere else.
And Clinton Township has not made that
But
decision
Well, that's what's
yet.
being
Well, that's
voted
what's
on right now.
That's
Oh, but
what's
just
the
a point
motion.
of clarification, if I could.
So-
Did they opt out under the MMFLA, or did they opt out under recreation? Because it's an important distinction.
Well, my question basically is, the final decision in terms of whether the township is going to opt in or opt out is going to take place after the May 22nd meeting?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Right.
Mr. Keys?
To clarify for myself here, I think what we're saying here, we're making the decision tonight, but an ordinance can also be reversed the next night. And so if I'm misunderstanding, the final decision is being made tonight, and then, of course, new information can come in, and we can always reverse any of the ordinances that we passed here tonight. Am I wrong in that thinking?
No, I mean, an ordinance is a legislative act. It's subject to amendment
Right.
by the same legislative body that adopted it.
So,
I'll let Mr. Gilliam go then.
so if I could, this is, as we started off talking about this, we said it's a very difficult issue to navigate because there's these three different laws. In 2008, the voters adopted the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, which allowed people to do either the grow your own or assign yourself to this caregiver. They grow the 72 plants for themselves and 5 others, right? The federal government, mind you, marijuana is still illegal under federal law. It's still, in fact, a Schedule I narcotic under federal law. Most people don't believe that it's a narcotic, but that is still listed as an illegal substance. And so as a result of that, the Justice Department under the previous administration basically said, we will not enforce federal law as long as your state has what they called a robust regulatory framework. And so the state of Michigan, under that 2008 law, did not have a robust regulatory framework. And so the state legislature went to work and they created the MMFLA, the Michigan Medical Marijuana Licensing Facilities Act. And what that did is to say, we're going to create this robust regulatory framework that's required under federal Justice Department guidelines, and we're going to create a revenue stream for the local communities by creating a 3% excise tax. And we're going to allow communities to say we're either opting in or we're opting out. So MMFLA passes, Clinton Township and local communities start looking at this, and then all of a sudden, more advocates get together and say, we're going to pass a recreational law in the state of Michigan and allow for recreational use and legal to have 2.5 ounces. And now the state has to go about creating and promulgating the rules. So it's not necessarily laws, but I think there will be some laws, because I don't think we've seen the extent of the laws that are going to be on the books on this. But right now, what we're waiting on is there was a board. They got rid of that board. The new board's in place. They're promulgating the rules right now in LARA, the Licensing Affairs Regulatory Agency of the state of Michigan. That board is responsible for coming up with these rules. They're not in place yet. So tonight, we're saying we're opting out of recreational use sales and permitting of any facilities until we understand what the regulatory framework is going to be.
Mr. Penna, you have the floor.
Thank you. And I completely understand that. And I guess, you can opt in at a later time and implement a lot of restrictions, and I get that. But I think the other potential issue too is, it's my understanding you're working on revising your master plan. So I would assume that you've spent a lot of time, potentially got the public involved, and, I guess the question is, have you already designated areas within that master plan?
The answer is no. And tomorrow night, if you're interested, at the South Branch of the Clinton Macomb Public Library, at 6:30, our planning director and his assistant will be going over the master plan, asking for input from the community.
Sure. So, but has there been areas that have been designated
No.
as green zones?
No. There was an issue with the planning commission a while back, and all of that's been put on hold.
Sure.
There's nothing green, as you
Because
said.
it's a process in itself, and I think it's a lot harder to revise a master
Mr.
plan
Cannon?
once it's in place.
Yeah.
Maybe it started, there was some consideration by the planning department of putting it together, but some of the board members, including myself, asked that it be separated.
Yep.
So maybe that's where the rumor started.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumors out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are
I just want to go on record for the gentleman who spoke and said, we have businesses, vacant businesses, and so evidently the inference, if not, he can correct me, the inference is that we need to have facilities buying, growing, selling marijuana. My position, since he came up and made that statement, is I don't believe that the answer is marijuana, because I think that it causes more problems in terms of cost. As someone stated earlier, there's enough revenue coming in probably for one police officer, but then afterwards it may cause enough problems that it would cancel all of those dollars. So I don't believe that the answer to everything is to be promoting something that your parents and grandparents and my parents and grandparents was wrong then. Now, all of a sudden, by the spin of a magic wand, it becomes legal, the magic wand being the law. So the answer necessarily isn't that we have businesses that, buildings that are vacant, and so the answer to those vacant businesses is marijuana, but particularly not in our community.
The point about the vacant businesses is the fact that because recreational marijuana is the law of the state, if we don't have any facilities, we won't even get the money for the one police officer. We will have all the marijuana here. It'll be people driving through, they'll have to be driving out as now they do for medical and such. And there again, I don't use marijuana. I'm just saying you got to be realistic. It's the law of the land right now, and we already have it in the community. If you opt in, you at least have the money for one police officer.
Mrs. Meltzer, we have a motion on the floor.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I apologize, I should have been thought, but I just was thinking, so we do have a condition already as an ordinance to grow medical marijuana and provide opportunities for caretakers to grow medical marijuana in the Clinton Township already. So that act of 2008 is already being facilitated by the board, ipso facto. So we currently have no ordinances on the books to permit commercial facilities to grow marijuana.
That's
In
correct.
Clinton Township, that's correct. So my argument is, so you're going to, this proposal's to ban recreational sales of marijuana. My proposal would be, why don't you add the medical dispensaries to this, because we're already facilitating the need for medical marijuana by having it grown in the homes. What is the need to have the medical facilities? Because in 2008, when that law passed, those facilities weren't really all medical. And oddly, they ended up all in the neighborhoods that didn't need it. They ended up like on 8 Mile between all the strip clubs. They didn't provide any gentrification to neighborhoods. They only provided worse. And on top of it, they're selling, I don't know, when you've been in Detroit a couple times, they stick postcards on your windows. And they say, come down, get your free samples and fire. So it's like, I'd never been to CVS before where they offer me free medication. So at some point, I do believe that there is a purpose for taking care of the people that need medical marijuana. We already did that as a responsible township. We let people grow it in their home. There is no need to have it done on a commercial basis because it's our goal in this, of all the board members today, to shoot for an objective to make Clinton Township better, not like 8 Mile. Sorry, 8 Mile. I don't mean to be degrading, but we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last comment. I promise that's my last comment, no more.
Mrs. Meltzer, roll call, please.
I think one more.
Just one comment. Alice Viviano, 37925 Woodcrest, Clinton Township. I want to know if the board is considering the fact that all the police departments, all the superintendents of Macomb County, the county executive, the county sheriff, all have come out against this. They don't think it's going to be good for the county, good for the townships. They've all asked all you boards not to do this. I want to know if this board is going to consider the opinions of those people that are going to have these problems in their schools, in their communities.
Mrs. Vivian, you would have the ability to call each and every board member, but I don't think board members have made up their minds entirely.
I understand. I just want to know that that's going to be considered in your final opinion when you decide to turn around and opt back in. That's all. Because I think it's inevitable, to tell you the truth. That's how we feel. But those are very important considerations. And on the medical basis, there are so many big organizations in the country, including the AMA, a lot of them that do not recommend even medical marijuana. Places like the Cleveland Clinic will not let their 400 doctors ever give it because it's not approved by the FDA. It's a medical thing that a political campaign has decided on how we treat people with problems. It's wrong. And there's almost no medical society in the country that is saying we should do this. It's not approved. And the thing that they really want to do and we should be doing is taking parts of marijuana that can help people with pain and with nauseousness and all that. They've already come up with 2 drugs that's approved by the FDA that can do the same exact thing as marijuana without all the adverse effects. So there's a lot of reasons not to do it. And if people can grow it in their homes and whatever, why do we need to sell it? And if we're going to sell it, we better figure out where to put it, where it's way back somewhere in an industrial area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Pearl?
Pardon?
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
That's
Yes.
to adopt the amendment,
Yes, sir.
This is to adopt the ordinance.
the ordinance.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 16, request to amend the previous denial to permit outside beer and wine sales.
Mr. Cannon, so at the last board meeting, we had an applicant, a resident actually, that is in the audience right now. Mr. Barr, if you want to come on up. No? Okay. So I think there was some misunderstanding on the amendment. St. Thecla is hosting their annual festival, and they want to be able to sell beer and wine outside. So the a motion was that, made by Mr. Pearl, and I forget who seconded it, but that motion was that they not be able to sell outside, that they actually, because there is one portion of the activity that is going to be inside. So I think the interpretation by the board was that they would be able to sell their beer and wine indoors. However, then there was a motion made to that effect and a second, and the board voted unanimously to allow for only indoor sales of beer and wine. However, the next day, the petitioner contacted me and said that that was not what he was asking for. And so what we're trying to do today is, it says to request to amend, but we really want to rescind the previous denial. And then at the next motion, we would approve the final sales or disapprove outside of beer and wine.
Mr. Dolan, is that what you're looking for?
I believe what we're referring to is the approval that occurred would result in the money exchange having to be occurring inside as opposed to outdoors.
It was in the tent, though.
Correct.
Right.
And what they would like to be able to do, as we've done with other businesses, is allow them to actually take the money in the tent as well. And in
That's
order
what
for
my
that to
motion
occur, as the clerk indicated, we would have to rescind the portion of the motion that was originally passed that limited them to the sales occurring indoors, the exchange of
It
funds.
was in the tent, though.
No, see, the confusion, Mr. Cannon, Mr. Dolan, I think the confusion was that there's inside the building and inside the tent. And so what I think we all thought we were approving, but the language didn't come out that way. So there's, by law, we can't just approve what we intended. The language was that we were approving the sales inside the building, not inside the tent. And that's where they want the sales to occur. Is that correct? Mr. Barr, come on up.
I didn't even see.
Tim Barr, 38339 Delta.
Yeah, we don't want to get this wrong a second time,
I
so.
know. So the request was for sales inside the tent,
Yes,
right?
yes, but we interpreted that
That's
as,
what I said.
no, you didn't. You said inside the building. So that would create a logistical problem for, we looked at the minutes, so we just need to clarify that
Look
and
at the
rescind.
date.
Wait, further to grant permission of bird collection in the main tent.
I'll move that we rescind the previous motion that I made.
Support.
Roll call.
Well, rescind and
Yes,
replace,
supported
though?
by-
Well,
First
so
we have
that's
to
the next,
Could be,
rescind.
that's gonna be the next.
the next agenda item is going to be to approve with
So
allowing
who
for
sec-
outdoor
Who
sales.
got the second on that, Mr. Gillum or Mr. Keys?
Mr. Keys.
Okay. Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes.
And I'll
Motion
move
passes.
that we approve, do you want to give me the language?
Outside
I
sales.
Sales of
think
beer and wine
approve
in the
the-
tent during the festival.
Outside
The
sales.
festival itself and the
We're
sale.
approving, yeah. We're approving the festival and we need to allow for outdoor sales.
We already approved the festival, so we
Yeah.
would have to approve the outdoor sales
We
of
just
beer and
rescinded.
wine.
Move that we approve outdoor sales of beer and wine.
In
Support.
the tent.
Yes.
Just for clarification on that, now they'll be able to complete the entire sale outdoors without having to bring money inside, correct?
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's what you
Is
want.
that what you want?
Correct,
In the tent.
correct.
I think we need to put in the tent.
Well, we said
I real-
outside, though.
I know, but I think we need to put in the tent personally. I'm sorry. I do. I
Outside
do.
in the tent.
I mean, I could be in the corner, you know,
you want, I'll
making
read
money
it.
on beers.
Let
Come on.
let Mr.
you know?
Barr read it. Go ahead,
So
Mr. Barr.
here's our request, right? We're requesting permission to collect money in the main tent area for raffle tickets, 50/50 raffles, fast food, pop, water, beer, and wine. Basket raffle tickets will be in the gathering space.
Okay.
That'll be indoors,
Is that your
which is
intent?
So
where you're
moved.
connecting the.
And I
Wait a
supported
minute,
it.
we got
We're
to,
good.
Mr. Pro, but who seconded that?
I did.
Mr. Argona, okay.
Mr. Keys?
Just quickly, I know I have joked in the past that I'd actually, for items like this, would like a form to be created because we do kind of get just a blank piece of paper with the drawing of what people are going to be doing and then just a form letter, sometimes just handwritten. I think to kind of help with this confusion in the future of exactly what they're looking for, if we could get some type of form created that allows you to check a box if you want this, would be great. That's just my point of information.
Thank you.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Motion passes.
Mr. King?
Thank you.
I was in line here. I'm all for the approval of this, so I'm glad you approved it. The one thing I was going to say is the irony of all of the marijuana users in the township will be surprised that all the anti-marijuana people left before this, they don't have a problem with this, and I just thought that to be an ironic thing, that's all.
Thank you. Item
Points well taken.
18, request approval to begin strategic planning and create an RFP for consultants.
Yes, it would have been good for them to stay to hear this letter because many of them are interested in this. Dear board members, as I announced at the 2019 State of the Township, I recommend the township embark on a strategic plan to help chart our future. This plan will be developed by a strategic planning committee of community stakeholders, including residents of varying demographics and geographic locations throughout the township, business leaders and owners, educational representatives, and township staff as resource persons. This group of stakeholders will need to work with a skilled facilitator to identify a community vision and aspirations, community strengths and weaknesses, and vision of the future, and determine community goals and strategies for the use of the township board and future boards as we develop our annual and longer-range spending priorities. Therefore, I'm recommending a request for proposal be developed by the Budget Ways and Means Committee for a facilitator that would be retained by the township to guide the strategic planning process and assist the strategic planning committee in framing the work of the group as they work through the process. Once RFPs are received, the Budget Ways and Means Committee will review proposals, interview prospective facilitators, and recommend a facilitator to the board for approval. The timeline I recommend is for a facilitator to be appointed by summer, the Strategic Planning Committee appointed by fall, and wrap up and presentation to the board in January 2020. This strategic plan will serve as a guidepost for the board as we arrive at our staffing and spending decisions. Sincerely, Robert Cannon, Supervisor.
And the timeline that I suggested might be a little optimistic, and we won't know that until we appoint someone who will oversee the process for us. Everyone will have input. Anyone in the community who would like to have input, we will try to get their input also. This is a total community-wide project. We're talking about such things as splash pads. We're talking about such things as lights for the baseball fields. We're talking about a lot of things that are nice for a community, but what is, as a group, that the community wants, not just what a few of us want.
Mr. Cannon, we talked today in the staff about possibly inviting because the Budget Ways and Means is just a recommending body, we thought possibly that inviting representation from each of the recommending bodies of those committees that exist in the townships, and there are various ones, to attend the Budget Ways and Means, and it would just be an invitation to attend and hear from them to kind of help us move forward in this process.
I'm fine with that. Mr. Gilliam?
So I'm very much in favor of this. I think this is something that is probably long overdue. I think we've been a steady community. We've been a growth community. We've seen that growth stagnate. And now I think we need to put some strategic vision into where do we go from here? How do we put this together? How do we make things happen? It's one of the things that the county did when they saw from being a high-growth county to seeing the dollars begin to stagnate and wanting to create a process that looks at us from what are our strengths, what are the things we do well, what are the things that we have here, what are the assets that we have that we think are going to be the anchors of the future and the things that we can build on. How do we take things like the river and use that as a way to help facilitate and provide us with future growth and recreational opportunities. And as Frank in his planning process, our recreation director, talks about how do we create the experiences that our residents are looking for. And I think so this is something that can encapsulate all of those things. But as Ms. Meltzer said from the staff meeting today, yeah, we do have a lot of different recommending bodies. We have a lot of committees. So I'm glad to see, because it's one of the points I made in the staff meeting. I'm glad we're sort of putting that as a part of this. This is something that is part of the master planning, but I think the problem is we didn't have a master plan. We're required by state law to have one, and so as a result, we had to quickly go about putting this master plan together. We do want people to come out. We want them to come to this meeting at the library to give us their thoughts, tell us the things that they want to see. But I think that's not the only opportunity. What we're doing here today is creating a second opportunity for people to weigh in. But to do it in, I think, is a very strategic way with having a company facilitate that input from the community and then advising us as to how we put it together. So I see this as a great step, and it's something that I think we need to get right to work on. So I hope we can meet your ambitious timeline.
I do too, but I should tell you that we need to attract young families. And the things that we talked about, the parks, the kayaks, splash pads, lights for the ball field, I mean, those are things that are going to attract younger families. But we also need to make sure we take care of the seniors who are already here. And we have a lot of senior residences in the community. And we have a lot of new construction with both of our major hospitals in the community. So there's going to be more who are going to want to be closer to the hospitals. So we're going to continue to attract, but we want to take the best practices of other communities, such as Sterling Heights. If anyone has driven down Dodge Park Road to where their park is over there and seen what's there recently, that's because they did this, and they did it well. And that's my goal and my vision, and I'm hoping to get a unanimous vote on this tonight. Mr. Pearl?
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Cannon. We've done this before with the schools. We were dealing with 20 different school buildings and 16,000 students. It's very important that we focus on what's important for the community and the education of the students. So it did work out very well. sharpen everybody's mind on what was needed and got a lot of input from the community. I would agree with your recommendation.
Mr. Keys?
Thank you, and I also support this recommendation. I'm excited to be moving forward in this process. For me, in going through that MSU extension course and learning from my colleagues here on the board, I can see that this process is going to allow us to capitalize on the assets we have here in Clinton Township. And it's going to give us a spread-out view of the township as well. And we're going to be able to say that in 10 years, how we want the township to look. And again, to Mr. Cannon's point, how we can attract those new families and those new investments into our community to continue to capitalize on it. So I appreciate this being brought forward, and we'll be supporting it.
Thank you.
I'll move the recommendation.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Keys. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl.
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melser, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. I'm counting on everyone to give their input. Thank you very much. Item 19, request a closed session, legal opinion in regard to Lipke Street water easement acquisition.
Mr. Cannon, that's a written legal opinion, just for clarification.
I'm sorry,
Written.
Written legal opinion.
written legal opinion. Thank you.
So
And we will not be coming out of closed session for this item.
moved.
Is there a second?
Support.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melser, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. And item 20 is again to request another closed session with pending litigation with Clinton Township versus Purdue Pharmacy.
And others? Opioid litigation? So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Melser, yes. Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Motion passes.
We will not be coming out of that closed session either. Item 21 is adopt resolution revising the general fee schedule fire prevention code.
This was an add-on at the last meeting, and so it is appropriate for us to vote on this for final adoption.
So moved.
Support.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Argona?
Yes.
Mrs. Melser, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you. Item 22, request approval to use a vacant lot on Harrington Street.
Mrs. Meltzer, it has been brought to my attention that Roncelli, Inc. needed to go before the Board of Clinton Township to obtain permission for the use of the vacant lot at 21550 Harrington Street, Clinton Township, Michigan, 48036. Our intended use for the lot was for contractor parking of personal vehicles for workers working on the McLaren-Macomb job site between April 2019 and January 2020. We have already worked out and executed a land lease with the landowner and begun stoning the lot with 8 inches of 21 AA on top of fabric and a 1x3 tracking road coming in off of Harrington. When we initially spoke to the building department, followed by the Public Works Department on 4/9 of 2019, we were told that permits were not required. However, I have received a phone call from Barry Miller today in the building department, who had informed me that the use of a lot would need to be reviewed before the township board in order for us to begin using the lot. I'm reaching out to you to see if it would be possible to fit us on your agenda for the Monday 22nd Township Board meeting to obtain permission for use of the lot as construction parking. Sincerely, Justin Bott, Project Manager, Roncelli Incorporated.
Thank you. We are very fortunate to have not only McLaren doing the construction they're doing right now, but also Henry Ford Macomb has extensive plans to expand their campus and facilities. We are lucky because they went from nice little local hospitals to regional facilities that now attract people from many different areas. It allows people to stay home or stay near home while they're getting treatment, where in the past they would have to go to Detroit, Ann Arbor, and even further to get that treatment. This merely allows them to make it easier to build this site over there on Harrington Road, because it's going to be one of the finest emergency rooms in the state of Michigan, and right smack dab in the middle of us.
It already has been.
Move to approve.
Support.
Supported by Mrs. West. Gentlemen, there's
No.
If we,
Mr.
so, all right, so yeah, you're here, you stayed all night, so I feel compelled to ask you a few questions. No, so basically, this is going to be for temporary parking, correct? Okay, and will all of this be restored to its original once the use is no longer needed?
We need your name and address on for the record.
Jeff Larson, you want the business
Whichever.
address or the property address?
Business.
I'll have to look it up.
It's right on your letter here. It's,
64710
Yeah,
Metro Parkway, Sterling
Yep.
Heights, Michigan 48312.
Sorry about that. We have a lease with the owner of the property, and in that lease, it's up to his discretion on what type of restoration he wants us to make. We are fully prepared to make a full restoration, which is just the removal of the gravel. That's the only improvement we're making, is putting a gravel base down so the cars will be able to park on top of it.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's a little concerning, because I thought we were talking about full restoration. So it's the owner's option to do this, and are we?
It's in the lease. There was already gravel down. We didn't
I
think
see
that-
there's kind of some gravel there. but-
Yeah.
And this is next to the railroad track, but, I mean, it's a lot across from the hospital. They're putting a lot of money into the hospital. I don't know what state they want that left in, if it's a state of disrepair, kind of as it is now.
If you want the gravel removed, we're more than willing to do so. It's just that with the existing gravel and walking the site, Justin walked the site, we didn't think that it would be, we didn't want any cars or pickup trucks getting stuck over there on a temporary basis. So we just wanted to put down an improvement of that base. It does end up being an improvement, so if the owner wants to, that was the theory, that if the owner wanted to keep that improved base for whatever use they wanted to use it for after we're done with it, they're more than welcome to do so. But if the board would like us to remove it, and
So-
that's the ruling, it'd be fine.
So just a sort of a good compromise position here is, you're making improvements, but it'll be up to the owner. If we approve it tonight, we approve it for temporary use, and it'll be up to the owner to come and get a permanent fix to the land and restoration.
Mr. Roncelli
that-
is one of the biggest donors to the hospitals in the area.
I've met him.
He's not
I
going to
understand.
allow a piece of property across the street from one of his pride and joys to be in disrepair. I can assure you of that.
Well,
That's
but I can assure you that we have to ensure that we provide temporary use for the hospital and accommodate them, which is what we are all, I'm sure, willing to do. But in the end, the final disposition of that property and the quality left should be left for them to come back and make that.
Well, I don't
or seek
disagree that
final
they should
approval.
remove it. However, what if it adds value to the property, and now the person who owns the property can put a nice building on it because of what they've done?
And he can come with that plan.
That's fine, okay, then
So-
we agree.
So I'm not calling for full a restoration, which is why I'm seeking a compromise.
Well, I made the motion, so what if I just change the motion to read approve the request with the stipulation that when they're done with the use of it, that the owner comes before us to for us to make a decision what to do with the property condition.
I think that's ultimately workable. I think that's a great
okay?
solution.
Mr. Cannon?
Mrs. West, then?
Okay.
Please, thank you. Mr. Brissy, Tom Brissy, the CEO, President and CEO of McLaren, came before us, before the Planning Commission, and also had it approved by this board to have a new building put up in this area. So obviously, I don't know if you all are doing that building. This piece of property encompasses where that building would be. So obviously, there's some change of plans so that we can get the trucks in there and the trucks out and all that fun stuff.
That
So-
plan,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, that plan is still a plan.
Yes.
Tom Brissy has not changed his mind about that. Takes a long time for these things to come to fruition.
Right.
But that's his ultimate plan. So any improvements we're doing over there would probably be totally removed if we're going to put a building in that
Right.
place and excavate for foundations and
Right,
basements.
because there is supposed to be a building on that property, and then it comes out with the parking, et cetera.
My only
But you're-
concern here is.
No, I get it, I get it.
Okay, we have a temporary use parking lot. We're approving it for temporary use. They want to build a building, but that's 5 or, 7 years down the road, then,
Hopefully not.
That wasn't what he was
I don't
looking
want it
at.
to
He
look
was-
bad.
He's looking at earlier than that.
Plans
Okay.
change.
I understand that, I
Let's
understand
get
it.
back to the topic at hand.
And I don't know if Mr. Cannon knows anything, being on that board, but when you talk about things taking a long time, I was there for 18 years. I understand that. So,
I do have information that I'm not allowed to share at this time.
Never mind.
Mrs.
So,
Meltzer?
thank you, Mr. Cannon. So our director from the building department personally requested this, and staff today, that we put as part of our motion to approve it, we're going to approve it, but it would have to, the lot would be restored to its original state. And I think that's important to abide by that. At any time, the petitioner can come before us and request a change. But at this point, I think based on our department head making that request, I think, and that is our normal practice, I think that that's what we should abide by unless.
That makes it easier for our for our building department.
We have no problem with that at all.
Okay. Mr. Earl, will you put that into your motion?
Oh, sure.
And who was the supporter
You
of
have
the
that,
motion?
Carol?
West, Mrs. West, you were a
Which
supporter.
version?
The last one.
You seconded that?
Did I?
I think it did.
But the owner
And
can
it's
come
good for me.
before
Good
us
for you.
prior to you doing it and say, this is what we have plans to do.
But so long as I forgot. Yes, I'm good with that. I'm
So
good.
we
And
have
any
a motion.
change, they just come before us.
Right.
We have a motion and a support. Yes, sir.
Yes, well, I would just like to say, I think it's really important to have that it has to be restored to the original condition, because otherwise you're approving a permanent, you're not doing a temporary, you're doing a permanent gravel parking lot without any drainage positions or, without anything. There's a lot of things that go in a parking lot once you get it impervious to where you have to have drainage and such. And so it really is necessary that it be restored to the natural condition at the end of the year.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes, motion passes.
Thank you. You're all set. Approval of the minutes of the April 8th, 2019 regular township board meeting.
So moved unless there's any changes.
Is there a second?
Second.
I just have one word to be added. When we were talking about Heritage Estates, the first sentence about talking about it was that the wood would be replaced on the deck, but it would be replaced with plastic material.
Okay.
It wasn't clear, so if we could just clear that.
Composite.
Composite.
Well, it's a plastic, composite material. Fine.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona? I'm sorry, Mr. Gilliam?
Yes,
I was looking at you, but I don't know why I said that. Mrs. Meltzer, yes, motion passes.
we look alike.
Approval of the bills.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Meltzer, yes. Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mrs. West?
Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We have two public comments this evening. The first is Sam Bushell.
Thank you.
Yes, I am requesting that the board ask the Attorney General of Michigan for an opinion on the legality of the 7-cent gas and tax enacted by the state legislature without a vote of the citizens. This was actually enacted after the citizens at a public vote turned down a new gas tax. Clinton Township is the most populous township in Michigan. We have 2 state senators. One is a Democrat, one's a Republican. We have 2 state representatives. One is a Republican, one's a Democrat. So this is not anything political about this. It's not political. It's strictly to protect the citizens of Clinton Township. On September the 4th, 2018, the Board of Trustees, this board, adopted a resolution urging the state of Michigan to immediately begin work on fixing the road funding and equity of PA 51 of 1951. This is the act that doesn't give the townships any money. It gives the cities money and the county, but not us. This noted the new 7-cent gas tax enacted without a vote of the citizens in that resolution. As of today's date, because I did a Freedom of Information Act request, neither of our senators, neither of our state representatives, the governor's office, nobody has contacted back the township. That's the respect we're getting as over 100,000 voters. I'm sure they're going to be much more interested in us the next election cycle. The Board of Clinton Township works for and are paid by the citizens of Clinton Township. They should not be bound by protecting the revenue stream of the state. We, the citizens of Clinton Township, have received no money from the gas tax, nor will we unless PA 51 is changed. We also know that as of yesterday's Free Press, that our state is grandfathered in to twice the federal weight limits on roads. The federal limit is 80,000. We have 160,000. The experts all agree that the total gross weight of trucks do damage our bridges. They disagree on some of the other stuff. But for only $50 for one trip and $100 for multiple trips to travel our roads and bridges with more than 450,000 pound loads, 450,000 pounds, the federal level is 80,000. Then we, the taxpayers, have to pay to rebuild them roads. The legislature and governor have no plan to correct this, so we must be ready to pay. We pay the Attorney General and deserve her opinion on this potential violation of our state constitution. And there again, it doesn't cost the town. The township has asked for Attorney General's opinions in the past year. It's the force of law. And I think when you have such disrespect from our senators and from our House of Representatives, you have to do something. I think that, there again, I've been bringing this up. In fact, I thought it was going to be on the agenda tonight. I had one board member say it was going to be on the agenda tonight. Obviously, it isn't.
10 seconds.
Good. I'm done.
Thank you. Second, Bob Hogan.
Bob Hogan, 36755 Bar Street, Clinton Township. At a trustee meeting last December or January, a board member mentioned that there is a list of vacant storefronts and buildings in the township. On February 12th, I went to the following offices to get this list. I went to Public Works, the Treasurer's Office, the Clerk's Office, the Building Department, and finally the Assessor's Office. At 10:10 a.m. on the 26th of February, I met with Mr. Elrod to get a list of the vacant properties in Clinton Township. He said they, meaning the Assessor's Office, is busy this month of February. March will be a real busy month, but he will mail it to me the first part of April. I met with Beth in the Assessor's Office on 4/15 at 12:55, and she was unaware of it, but she took down all the information and said she'd pass it on to Mr. Elrod. Nothing happened. Then I met with Jessica, also in 4/18 at 2 o'clock. Actually, I know everybody just about by the first names there. And she said that she would pass it on to both Beth and Mr. Elrod. As of today, the 22nd, I received no telephone call, no U.S. mail, no email, no voicemail, nothing. I don't know if Mr. Elrod chose not to send the documents or if he was told not to send the documents. A platform. Mr. Aragona hopes to encourage new businesses to move to Clinton Township, filling vacant properties and growing the local economy. How can Mr. Aragona do any of these things without knowing what storefronts and buildings are vacant? If a businessman asked him what's available in a specific location in the township, he'd have to tell that businessman to drive around and look for himself. I don't understand why this information is not being forthright and given to me. Mr. Keys says, people throughout the township are looking for transparency. I'm still looking for transparency. I'm actually looking for the list. At this time, I've concluded it's a waste of my time to go to the assessor's office for this list. If I get it in my email, good. If not, I'll mention it again at the next board meeting. Thank you.
A motion to adjourn to go into closed session is in order.
So moved.
A roll call, please.
Bob?
Mrs. West? Yes.
Mr. Keys?
Yes.
Mr. Pearl?
Yes.
Mr. Cannon?
Yes.
Mr. Aragona?
Yes.
Mr. Gilliam?
Yes.
Mrs. Melser, yes. Motion.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned to go into closed session.